What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I do hope you guys are doing well. Welcome back to another New World video. In today's video, I want to discuss something that has been on my mind to make over the last few months, and that is essentially a discussion around new player mistakes. Essentially, this game, as much as it is fairly linear to follow in a lot of paths, there are a few vital mistakes that I made myself, and I see a lot of other people making too, which I feel like we should just cover in this video. So without any more waffle, let's get straight into it. Alright, so we've switched over now onto our character. You can see I'm still progressing through some of the weapons. I've hit level cap, started working towards the end game grind, doing a lot of mutated dungeons, preparing for the raids. But yeah, let's just break it down. The first point I feel like people get sort of trapped into, and it's a bit of a misinformation on New World's part, and that is the idea of whichever archetype you pick from the beginning is what you're stuck with, and that's just not the case. From the get-go, when you spawn into the game, you are presented with a plethora of different classes, quote-unquote, to choose, different archetypes, normally with different combinations of weapons, different trade skill head starts that you've got, and that's basically as deep as it goes. At no point are you locked into these. You can completely switch weapons at any point and go down whichever path you choose. If I'm being honest, I think the game kind of paints this in a bit of a deceptive light as some sort of a class-looking system, and that's just not the case. New World is completely classless for the most part. If you want to pick up a fire staff, a sword and shield, and use it, it might not be optimal, but you can absolutely do that. Your builds, you can kind of just make whatever you want to make. It's really, really up to you. You're not stuck in the linear tank healer DPS roles, as much as there are those roles in the dungeons. Outside in the open world, you are pretty much free to do whatever you want and play around with whatever you want. Quite often through many people's playtime, they'll mess around swapping from life staff healing all the way to playing around with muskets, sword and shield, heavy armor, light armor, everything in between. I think the best way I can describe it is if any of you guys have played RuneScape, then you can just kind of cast your mind back to that, where you'd be leveling strength and attack with a sword, then you'd be switching over to a staff, using runes for magic, over to a bow for archery, so on and so forth, and it is very much the same in New World. Your actual archetypal gear that you get, your selection at the beginning, it is really nothing more than a couple of weapons, and I think you get 3 trade skills at level 50, which by the way is super easy to achieve in any skill that is 0. To get that to 50 is really easy. A lot of skills, to be honest, you don't even need to go out and farm yourself. You can get certain recipes that you can claim through the means of combat or dungeons that will straight up give you XP for those trade skills if you're not that fussed about actually farming them yourself. So yeah, if you're spawning in for the first time, just trying to get your head around what you should pick and, worrying about if it's going to impact you massively down the line, then just, put it to one side, take the pressure off for a sec, just pick a weapon, whether it be a staff, whether it be a sword and shield, a spear, just pick something that looks cool, that might feel cool to you. And the benefit you've got is if it doesn't feel good, if you're using it and you're just like, something just feels off, then you can just throw it away and just switch it really quickly. Like, it's not like you're playing World of Warcraft, for example, and you're like 40 levels into a class that you realize you've then got to start another character to make that class again, to try something else. New World isn't like that. Next up then, let's talk about Expeditions, the game's dungeon instant content. This is the stuff that you'll get access to earliest in the game in the form of group content. And to be honest, as much as the world building and the design of these dungeons is really good, what isn't good and what can throw a lot of people off is the actual experience of running these dungeons. I feel like the second new player mistake is assuming that this is going to be how group content is going to run for the foreseeable future. If I'm being brutally honest, I really wish they'd do away with the way that expeditions work currently. I wish there was some sort of level scaling or just something completely different for endgame players to run for these sort of daily rewards. If you guys don't know, the reason why there are so many level 65s or higher level players in your like level 25 expedition is because of these little rewards just here, just behind my webcam. You can essentially farm 3 of these per day and they will give you resources which are essentially vital for progress later on in the game, and that's why you find people absolutely blitzing from start to finish. You'll find people AFKing at the beginning of the dungeon because they know they're going to get the reward either way, or you'll find people literally sprinting through, tailing all of the mobs from start to finish and just ruining your experience. If you're an immersive player, if you're just trying to sort of take the dungeon in, unfortunately, the base expeditions are not the way to do it. It really pains me to say that because there's some really, really good content in here, but things do get infinitely better when you start moving on to the mutated stuff. Once you get to level cap, you'll be able to access mutated expeditions. This is where, for those of you that have played the likes of like Final Fantasy XIV Extremes, Savages, World of Warcraft, like Mythic Raids, perhaps not to that difficulty, but this is essentially what this content is tailored towards. This is designed to be a lot more methodical, a lot more team focused, a lot more synergy in the party, and a lot more difficult. There are a lot of mechanics in these mutated expeditions which are ramped up from the base version, and people tend to take these a lot more seriously. Depending on the gear and the synergy of the party, you can't really run through these from start to finish just pulling everything, as you will absolutely get wiped. The difficulty of the enemies is scaled up. A lot of them have really, really nasty debuffs and buffs to actually their damage, defenses, that sort of thing. There's mechanics you need to work through over and above what's in the standard version of the expeditions. I do kind of wish that the standard expeditions were a bit more like this, and I really wish that they didn't exist in the medium they do. Unfortunately, you will experience probably being kicked on the odd occasion, you will experience people AFK, and you will experience people running to the end, but the biggest new player trap is just assuming that this is how content runs for the foreseeable future, and I promise you that is not the case. It does get a lot better, but you've kind of just got to suck an egg, get to level cap, and then really start experiencing the game, which I know is really, really hard to digest. Next up on the list, I feel a big issue, or a kind of like a big problem when it comes to new players when they experience this game for the first time, is worrying about builds and stats and what's meta, what people are using, what does the most damage, what does the most AoE, which build should I go for, and everything in between. The reality is this game is designed for fun. Unless you are the top 5% of raiders in the game, which is really not going to appeal to you, at least not for a long time, none of that matters. Pick something that you find that you have fun with, that feels good to swing around, that feels good to throw fireballs with, whether archery is your thing and you like hailing arrows from afar, shooting muskets, launching giant pillars of ice, swinging great axes. Just find something that fits your class fantasy and go with it. Don't overthink each and every point allocation, because to be honest with you, all the way up until level cap, every single time you want to re-roll, it is free. You're not stuck with those point allocations. And to be honest, as you can see on screen now, even if I want to re-roll at max level, it's only costing me 50 gold. And you can do the same with your weapon masteries as well. You can see this one costs Azov, which I don't actually have. I've got an abysmally low Azov resource at the moment. But essentially, you've got the flexibility to play around. Just have fun. That's what the game is designed for. I really hate in the MMO space that we've just fallen into this linear trap of you must play this, you must use this weapon because of this, and that's just not the case. Games are there to have fun. The world is amazing to explore, so why not create a class that you're happy to explore with, that feels good to explore with? I mean, personally for me, I've always been a huge Lord of the Rings, huge Tolkien fan. Love Legolas, love Gandalf, Radagast, that sort of thing. So I've always liked archers, I've always liked casters, scholars, that sort of thing. And that's really what bleeds into my class fantasy with this game. This is why I kind of lean into the Fire Staff, the Void Gauntlet, archery, that sort of thing. You'll also find that throughout your content as you progress, you'll just pick up weapons that weren't even on your radar that just look really cool to use, have certain attributes on them that you want to use, certain gemstones that were already socketed for you, or maybe just something that you think looks cool that you want to try. You can do that. Be flexible, re-roll where you need to, and don't worry about the meta. Next up, a huge point of contention I see a lot of players struggling with is the factions. Now, factions, just off the rip, you do not have to bother with if you don't want to. Mainly if you're a PvE player, it's really going to give you a much less benefit if you're PvE focused over and above PvP. But if you don't want to be associated with any faction at all, you don't have to. Choosing your faction, if I'm honest, seems way more stressful these days than it actually needs to be. What it essentially boils down to, if you're PvE focused, is mainly, have you got some friends that are in a certain faction already that you kind of like the idea of, that you want to group with them? Great, then of course, join the same faction. Some factions have certain cosmetic gear that looks cooler than the other, or maybe to your taste, then by all means, go for that faction. And above all, it's mainly just sort of color preference when it comes to PvE stuff. Now, also just a side note, some factions actually, I think from the top of my head, still offer certain pieces of armor and weapons that have different bonuses, which is like bonuses to cooking or weaponsmithing, something like that. So that's maybe something you want to factor in. But over and above that, if you're a PvE player or just someone that just wants to explore the open world, then really it's not going to trouble you too much. There are certain resources which will be locked behind certain progression tiers of your faction. A lot of endgame crafting stuff which has a limited window of opportunity to get, one of which can be through your faction reward tiers, and some can be done in certain content, so that might be something you want to consider. But really and honestly, when it comes down to factions, it's more of a case of, are you into PvP? Because if you are, your factions really are only really going to matter for wars, buffs, and sort of influence races, that sort of thing. Essentially, for those that don't know, if you are in a faction and you're PvPing, you can go and capture forts for the faction, which will then give you certain world buffs. These buffs, they are temporary, but they also do apply to certain territories as well. So you'll get buffs when you're in town, you'll get lower taxes for like crafting or just generally selling on the market. And of course, not missing the obvious, if you're in a faction, you'll be introduced to faction on faction war, so open world PvP or larger scale PvP too. As a side note, if you are a PvPer, you might want to look at the percentage of the population of each faction. Is there a real dominant faction that is, you know, absolutely everywhere? If that's the case, I think it used to work where you couldn't join a certain faction if there was too many. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but that might want to be something you want to factor in. You know, do you want to join a faction that's 5% of the total population, for example? Last but not least is quite a common one, to be honest, and that is to do with assigning your territory standing points incorrectly. As you play the game, as you explore different areas, you start to kill things, gather things, complete quests, and just generally go about your day in New World, you'll start to accrue territory standing points. Now, these points can be spent on a multitude of upgrades. You've got XP buffs, which will increase the XP that you get by doing activities out in the open world. You've got reductions to trading fees that you can see on the side here, station fees, so you get charged less when you're crafting, storage increases, and gathering speed increases too. There is one thing that is really, really important to note, and I feel like this is where people fall down an absolute trap. One of these major bonuses, being the EXP buff, is only relevant whilst you're leveling. After that, once you get to level cap, it is lost, it's wasted points. As you move further and further into the end game, you start collecting more crafting, life skill materials, weapons, artifacts, all manner of things. You are going to need more space, you're going to need more resources that are available to you when it comes to crafting. You're going to need to be punished a lot less for actually crafting the items in terms of financial value. And when it comes to selling items that you pick up, either in instance content or crafted items, then of course you want to be, you know, punished as little for that as possible. Now the issue is here, this is why I've said be mindful about using the EXP buff, as right now, to my knowledge, this might change a little bit in the future, there is no way to re-roll these points. Once they're spent, they are spent. So anything you put in the EXP buff section is completely wasted. I would personally focus in on more storage space. Gathering speed is a bit hit and miss really. You've got a lot of tools that will do that for you, but certainly the trading fee reductions and station fee cost reductions are going to be really, really helpful the later on you get into the game. So yeah, I didn't want to draw this video out too much, guys. Hopefully this has been helpful. If you get any questions about anything that I've spoke about today, leave it in the comments below. Anything else you want me to cover New World related as well, leave that in the comments too. And I'll see you in the next video.